Alrighty. We'll get things kicked off here, and thanks for everybody who has joined us to talk through some trends and best practices for buying HR technology. If you're on this call today, you're in the market or you're looking to buy tools in the next 12 months or so, and we're going to go through some tips and tricks, some trends that we're seeing in the marketplace, as well as really specific tactics that you can use to find the right tools, implement them correctly, pay the right price. It's really complicated to navigate this landscape. I am Phil Strazula. I'm the founder of Select Software Reviews, and we started a company that literally all we do is we help companies to navigate this landscape through reviews. On our website, we have experts that leave reviews, as well as individuals who are users of the tools that leave reviews. And then you can actually sign up to talk to somebody on our staff completely for free, do a 20-minute call and say, hey, I'm looking for an HRIS for a 500-employee company. Hey, we're buying a company. We need an ATS. We're looking for restaurant scheduling technology, whatever the case may be. And restaurant scheduling is actually one of the questions that we got submitted for this webinar. So we're excited to dig into that later on. But that's all we do. About 100,000 companies a month use our research to find and buy the right tech. And many of you are familiar with that, but wanted to kind of set the ground for where we're coming from. In today's call, we're going to have a pretty far-ranging discussion that, again, focuses on the specific tips and tricks that you can use to find and buy the right software for the right price. And I'm joined here with two gentlemen who have a wealth of knowledge that they can bring to this conversation. Matt, I'm going to introduce you first. Matt Karp is a champion of HR technology. He works for a company called Willia, and they're specifically focused on bringing flexible work options to manufacturing companies through innovative HR solutions. Matt, thanks for joining us, and I'm looking forward to learning from you. I've already learned from you in the couple of minutes that we were chatting here before we kick things off.
Absolute pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Trent Cotton. Trent, you were a consultant at one point as well, but now Vice President of Talent and Culture at Hatchworks AI, and really focused on everything from recruiting through engagement, L&D, you name it, the employee life cycle, and excited to learn from you as well, Trent.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we've gotten a number of questions as well when folks registered for this webinar, and thank you very much for the amazing and many times specific questions. We're going to get to those throughout this conversation, as well as at the end. We're going to have time at the end to ask even more questions. If you have them, feel free to drop them in the chat at any time, and we will get to them at the appropriate time. We also have a couple of topics that we sort of want to get through. And of course, here are our lovely faces, so you can actually see our titles and our companies before I kind of switch it over and make our heads the main topic of conversation here. But I guess, I wanted to kind of start things off perhaps with talking through what are some of the trends that you guys are seeing in the marketplace here. And Trent, maybe we can start off with you and thinking through what are some of the things that folks should be aware of when they're looking at HR technology today?
Yeah, I think the two that I hear the most and the two that I get to help our clients with the most both start with A. One is AI and the other is analytics. So I'll talk about the non-obvious one first, analytics. It's really interesting to me. I got into HR 20 years ago. I came over as a banker. So my minor was statistics and finance. So I'm a numbers guy, always have been, didn't lose that whenever I got into HR. So I always approached HR from a very business acumen aspect of it. And I was a lone wolf there for a while, but I think with the pandemic, it really heightened the need for nice, clear, easy to use, easy to understand, and easy to make decision on analytics. To me, it was like that was probably one of the biggest things that I was talking about during the pandemic with people. I mean, they were trying to figure out, how many people do we have available? Who's here? Who's where? All these different things that most companies were just not prepared from a data standpoint. So I think that that continues to be a pretty large, what do you call, it's a very driving force. I think, I know for applicant tracking systems, that's one of the first things I look at is what's the reporting.
What are you looking for specifically within reporting for ATSs?
Oh, for applicant tracking systems, it's very similar to what I would look for in a sales management system. I look for the pipelines. I'm really big about funnel, from the top of the funnel all the way to hire. What are the statistics throughout that stage of the process? Helps me with forecasting. So anything that's got a forecasting feature in it, pipeline stages, number of candidates, diversity is a huge one for me. Those are just kind of some of the big ones. To me, those are absolute, just bare minimum what an ATS should have. But unfortunately, I think, Phil, you probably know more than I do, that most applicant tracking systems were built for HRIS integration and not for recruiting. And I'm really excited because there's been a lot of people coming into the market and really kind of challenging that status quo and actually building it for recruiting without sacrificing the API and everything on the back end for HRIS.
Any that you like in particular?
We just converted to Recruit CRM. So
nice.
Yeah, that's they really impressed me because they had the other AI built into it. So just as an example, we had like 6 or 7 different steps because we place internally, but we also place for clients. So we kind of we're a hybrid model. And yesterday I was walking one of the recruiters through kind of creating that candidate profile and getting everything ready. And then we got ready to submit it. I said, you realize that we just cut out 7 of our normal steps because we were taking it, downloading it, putting it in ChatGPT, using our GPT, taking it, massaging it, then throwing it over here. And now it's just like one nice, easy little loop. So for me, that ease of use and having that AI where I can just go in there and say, create a candidate summary, and I want you to hit this, this, and this, and it automatically does it for me. Oh, it's beautiful.
And that's what you were using ChatGPT for.
Yeah, we built a pretty systemic GPT that we use to be able to present candidates in a very unique way, highlighting the strengths, highlighting how they actually were qualified for that particular role. And it was okay. It was good. But it was just like, an extra step. I am lazy, and that's why I love technology. If there is something that enables me to be lazy and still look efficient, I am usually the first buyer. So that's the applicant tracking system that we're using. Currently, we just switched over like 2 weeks ago, and I am loving it, especially on the reporting side of it, because I can start looking at some of those funnel statistics. Then in my previous ATS, I had to use something like Snowflake or Tableau to get the same. It's already built in. So analytics is a huge, huge thing for me. And I think that a lot of HR professionals are seeing the need because their businesses are asking for it.
Yep.
AI, I mean, good God, AI is just, it is all I live and breathe now. Part of it is because, we're doing this company-wide, we're doing this major AI pivot.
You mind talking about just like 3 or 4 things specifically that you use AI to do right now?
Yeah, right now. So I already listed one was the summary. The other is analyzing. So kind of going through and looking and doing some matching for, hey, this is the kind of candidate that I want. And in the system, it's got how much, like what percentage do you want the title to match, the education to match, the skill set to match, and then it just ranks them according to that. That was something that we were having to do somewhat manually. We were using ChatGPT there for a little while, but then I got a little concerned about the bias that's in ChatGPT. This just, again, we've only been doing it 2 or 3 weeks. Everything that I have been able to look at, it looks like it's pretty fair in our new ATS. And then on the outside is creating a central repository. I've managed large teams before, and we create this beautiful SOP that nobody read. And I was constantly answering the same question to the point where I had like a little notepad that had probably 15, 20 answers that I normally give, and I would just copy and paste because I'm like, I could divert them. They're not going to read it. I can just copy and paste and it saves me time. Now you can actually build your own version of a ChatGPT and a very secure data warehouse sitting on your server. So if you're in recruiting or HR or manage total rewards, you can dump all of that in there and then build a bot.
How hard is that to do? Like, is that something where it's like, hey, I need $100,000 and 4 devs, and or is it like?
We can build it as large or as small as you need it to be. That's the beauty, is that it's so, AI has not just democratized information, but I think it has also helped us be able to get a little bit more custom. So flashback, what, 4 or 5 years ago, if I wanted to do the same thing, I have to pull something off the shelf and then customize it. Now you can actually build it. You know, you can work with a firm like ours that can say, what do you want to build? What's the end goal? Who's the end user? And then build it. And it just saves you light years of time. So we've done that internally. That's one of the ways that we're leveraging AI. And for me, it's...
Sorry to interrupt you, but Matt, it looks like you want to say something. How are you leveraging AI, or what do you want to interject with?
I love this subject so much, and I've been using a product called customgpt.ai and absolutely love it. It's drag and drop, bring files in, and then you get your own bot. And it's really fantastic. I use it for external research. If I'm researching a client, I can bring in their entire website into the GPT. I can scrape the website. I can throw in their data. I can scrape their like K10s and like all their data and ask really specific questions about it. And on the HR side, when I joined Willia, all the data was kind of separated into a number of different categories, and I couldn't quite find the frequently asked questions that I was looking for. So I was able to take some of that data that I felt safe with. I put it in the bot, and then I was able to basically have a manager say like, hey, what's the policy on this? What's the process here? And build things out that way. And as like a new employee, it helped me get up to speed really quick. So I think it sped it up a couple months, just having that extra bot. And that kind of, anytime I had a question, there was a manager there that I could ask and know it was the right answer. So highly recommend using these new bots if you feel comfortable with them.
That's amazing. Are there any other trends that you guys think are worth highlighting before we move on to the next topic? No pressure.
I was going to say those are the two that I 90% of the questions I get about something to do with HR software is always one of those two things.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would highlight is potentially that it seems like a lot of the larger players in this space are building out everything, which I think is perhaps like a good thing for smaller companies that want one vendor that's like good enough ATS, good enough HRIS, etc. Obviously, as you get bigger, you have idiosyncratic needs, you need a point solution. But it is interesting to see Rippling, Deal, these mega companies launch basically the whole suite of software, and it's going to be cool to see how that plays out in terms of what's the risk of being a Rippling shop versus a Bamboo or whatever. But also, does it create a better experience for HR and employees and TA to have a good enough solution that can talk to itself really easily, and one vendor, it's probably cheaper, etc. So
I call it the chasing the features is what I've gotten myself wrapped up into. So I've gone from Gusto to JustWorks to ADP, and it's the marketing is getting really good on a lot of these. And so I'm going like, oh, now Rippling has this piece, and now they and so how do you kind of take a step back and be like, all right, do I actually need that, or are they just really good at marketing? And it's one thing that I'm struggling with, and I always talk about. It's like, all right, what do I actually need? And what I needed at the time was ADP Workforce Now, because they had the thing, and I can feel people rolling their eyes on this call because it doesn't have the best. But
you saw that? I was trying to keep them very still.
Yeah.
But as the company I was with was growing, we needed something that had that full suite. And to be honest, the customer service over there was fantastic for me. I know it's not always the case, but yeah, it was what I needed at the time, and I needed that full suite. And we'll see who gets to win in this battle, the Bamboo and the Deals and the all that.
I think we'll have a lot of winners, and it's nice to hear good things about ADP. You don't always hear good things about ADP, and especially about their customer success. But with that, we'll move on to something that I think is like unbelievably important for buying the right HR tech and getting your CFO to say yes and making sure you're focused on the right stuff. And that's building a business case, understanding and articulating the ROI. Trent, do you want to walk us through how you've done this in the past or best practices here for folks? And, we've only got a couple minutes to cover this topic, and it's probably something you can talk about for like a couple weeks, but where should people start?
Ease of use is usually the first. So I like to start with the end user, especially if it's something that I want that's a little pricey. I hit the pain points of the managers who are having an issue trying, what screen do they go to? They can't get the reports that they need. So I do take that into account. Most of the time that I'm changing, I'm usually consolidating. I think you kind of hit on it as, this one feature has got 3 or 4 of the things that I need. I'll get a little on each of these just to have it all in one place. So most of the time I'm doing a consolidation. So there is sometimes an expense save there, which is easy. It's hard cost. You can say, we're going from $50,000 to $40,000 a year. What gets really tough is showing these upgrades, amount of time saved. So, as an example, I gave the ATS that we're using now, it cuts out 7 steps. Well, I can almost figure out, okay, it took me about 10 minutes, and I know this stuff like the back of my hand, 10 minutes to get those 7 steps done. So if I'm computing how many candidates I'm normally submitting and what the hourly rate is, then I've got a cost that I can save by switching over to something that has already got some AI and automation built into it. So usually I hit the pain points of my end user because I want to be very client-centric. If there is any kind of cost saves going from one to the next, definitely highlight that. That's an easy hit. But I would encourage you to look at the percentage of increase in productivity, efficiency, as well as time saved. And just what I do is I just kind of attach an hourly rate to those that are affected and give an estimate cost. Those are kind of the 3-prong that I like to do. Nice and easy.
I think that's awesome advice. The 2 specific tactics that I would probably put in here are, one, if this stuff isn't intuitive to you of how your initiative is going to impact the business in terms of cost savings or increased revenue, find somebody in the business who has that intuition. And so there's somebody in the CFO's office, strategy group, somebody with an MBA who can help you to put this into a spreadsheet, because it is a lot of work and it requires a lot of thought. And if you haven't done it before, you got to have a teammate, take them out for lunch, and have them kind of help you put this into dollars and cents. The other thing that kind of gets overlooked, and I've done this a lot personally, is you do an initiative, you have all these ideas, and then 6 months later, the reality happens, right? And sometimes reality is better than you thought. Sometimes it's worse than you thought. And having that business case, that spreadsheet, it's almost like a journal entry. And so what I like to do is when I build a business case, I put a note in my calendar 6 months in the future of like review XYZ business case to understand like, oh, we thought our, cost efficiencies would be X and it was actually Y, and we were right or we were wrong. And I think you just learn to be a better allocator of resources that way. You can also build a ton of credibility internally by writing up a 2-pager on, hey, we implemented a new ATS. We thought X was going to happen. Y happened. Here are the learnings. Everybody else can learn from our success. That gives you a lot of juice for next time. Matt, do you have anything to add to this conversation about business case?
One, I love the follow-up because I think that's really rare that exactly 6 months later, exactly what you're saying. I don't think many people do that, and hugely advocating for that. If you can remember, if you can put it on your calendar. I think Trent did a really good job of saying, where's the pain? And like, how do you say that what we're going after is going to alleviate that pain? And starting from that kind of high level is extremely important. So what are you trying to solve for is kind of the main question that I'm always asking. What is the problem? What are we trying to solve? Does the solution do that? And articulate it as simply as possible. And sometimes it's complicated with people and kind of nebulous statistics of who's here, how much money do we save? Can you associate that savings to exactly this change, or was it something else? So the more you can get granular based on the pain points, I think the better.
Yeah.
And if I could just jump on that, that Matt said, that is, to me, that is always interesting, because I get a lot of vendors that reach out and go, hey, can I demo? I'd like to get your idea. And I ask all of them the same question: what problem are you trying to solve? And 9 times out of 10, they will go through features and benefits. I'm like, that is not what I asked. What are you trying to solve? And some of those platforms that I've got in my Santa Claus list, as I call it, those are the ones that in 2 sentences could tell me exactly what problem they were trying to solve, and it lines up exactly with the pain point that I have.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of amen on that, Matt. What problem, what are you trying to solve?
I love it. I think, interestingly enough, I used to work in venture capital, and the companies that you asked them what they did and they had a 10-minute answer, they hadn't figured out what they're doing. The companies you ask them what they do and they have a 1-sentence answer, that's the product. That's the business that's doing really, really well. And customers are like, yes, I want to decrease sourcing time, or, whatever it is. Let's move on to another topic that I think is always extremely difficult, which is, how do you find vendors? How do you vet vendors? How do you ultimately select companies? I've got a little secret for everybody on the phone. I'm going to put it into the chat, which is, if you're out there looking for vendors, you can talk to an expert for free and get advice by clicking on the link that I just put in the chat. And you can get a short list that's tailored for your business. And hopefully that's super helpful for you. For me, I've bought over $1 million worth of HR technology at this point, from, LinkedIn recruiter seats to ATSs to everything in between. And I think a couple of the best practices for me are, one, you want to have at least 2 vendors, ideally 3, at most 5, that you're looking at. You want to create that list through a combination of online research. Googling what is the best applicant tracking system isn't the best way to do things, but there's some signal there. And you're going to start across your journey to see some of the same names over and over again. And that's generally a decent sign. If you go to, the community that you trust, 3 or 4 people that you trust, Google, and you go on a webinar or 2 like this, and you see the same name over and over again, that's probably one that should be on your short list. Definitely stay super organized. So I create a spreadsheet, and the columns of the spreadsheet are the vendors, the rows are my criteria. I've probably got 6 or 7 key criteria. Maybe it's integrations, maybe it's workflows. I've got pricing model. And then one thing that I put in there is, how much do I like the salesperson? And that's kind of a weird thing, but the best salespeople, they can work at any company. They just show up and they're like, hey, I hit quota for the last 3 years, hire me. And companies are like, yeah, we want to hire people that hit quota. And how do they hit quota? How do they make the most money? They work for companies that have awesome products that are easy to sell. And so the best salespeople will always gravitate towards the best products where they can make the most money. And as an individual, I want to buy one of those products. And so that matters too. And I think that's a really good indication for, am I going to be taken care of post-close as well? The other kind of key criteria here, or the key piece of advice, is that spreadsheet that you keep that has all your notes from these demo calls, what I've seen done extremely effectively is you black out all the columns except for one of the vendors. So vendor C, let's call it ADP. And you send it to the ADP rep and you say, hey, here are my notes from our call. Here's the price that you quoted me. And they see the spreadsheet and they see there's 3 other columns there. And maybe they see the names of those other companies, and you will get a discount faster than you will believe, because they know that if you're talking to, Paylocity and Paycom and all these other companies, they know exactly how much they're going to charge you, and they're going to be like, okay, the thing I quoted you on the phone is actually wrong. Here's the real quote, and that is a unbelievable tactic that I've seen implemented to get the right price. I don't know, gentlemen, Matt or Trent, do you guys have anything to add here on this? How do you find vendors? How do you vet them? how do you select them? Question that, again, we could spend like 3 weeks on this, but
Right.
tactics.
I love that price, that tactic. That's really good. The other thing, I like to rank my spreadsheet of, all right, what do I absolutely need from this product? And what's a nice to have to make sure it bubbles up. So I get the product that I actually need and has the core systems. So ranking that. And then I like to, I mean, I'm a little biased. I'm in customer success these days. So if I ask a salesperson, hey, can you bring on my implementation specialist who onto the sales call early? I like to know if they say, no, absolutely not, we don't do that, versus, you know what, we normally don't do it, but let's bring in the customer success person so you get a chance to know the person. So you don't, which I think is really important for that transition, because you can have a great salesperson and you can have a terrible customer success person to do the implementation. If you have faith in kind of the whole process of that next step, it just gives me a lot more confidence on how it's going to roll out. And that implementation, again, I'm biased, I'm in customer success, is huge towards the whole project. I mean, you might have the perfect product, but if you misstep on how it gets rolled out, it can fail right there. So those are my 2 cents.
Isn't it funny that most of us in HR, we will interview a candidate more than we'll interview a vendor? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very much like you, Matt, and even you, Phil. You know, there are certain salespeople that I connect with. Mine is more knowledge base. You know, I don't like the slimy ones that are just I don't like those, but I like the ones that ask me the question I normally ask vendors: what problem are you trying to solve? And then here's how the product I think can alleviate it. And what I really like is whenever a salesperson goes, but here is where we're not going to be able to meet your need, but here's where it is on our roadmap. But then also, to Matt's point, I am huge about customer success, mainly because I usually wear them out. I like to get in and try to break a system. And I like it whenever I've got someone that is very proactive about, hey, we've got some changes that are coming up. Here's some new things. Can I schedule a call with you and the team so that way we can walk through it? Love that. Love that. Not going to mention any names, but you know, LinkedIn would learn a lot by doing that. So the implementation is probably where I put more emphasis than I do on the sales.
Mm-hmm. Is there any way that you found effective to vet how implementation is going to go before you sign a contract?
They're asking me questions I didn't think of.
Okay.
You know, which is not hard because I'm kind of a high level person. I don't really get into a lot of the details. But I mean, there was a vendor that I kept, and I went to 3 different places, 3 different employers, and every time I changed, I brought the vendor with me under the mandate that the customer service person or the client success person came along with the account. His name was Ben, because I loved Ben, and Ben knew how to handle me. I knew how to handle Ben. It was a great working relationship, and it just made the product even better.
Yeah.
And another clue is if the salesperson has talked to the customer success person before the meeting. So if you come in and the customer success is a great person but has no idea what's going on in the sale, that's another red flag. That you want the departments to all talk to each other.
Do you think you have to be a certain scale of company to get this sort of treatment? Like if you're like a 30-person company, like, is it ridiculous for you to ask to talk to customer success, or you're like, no, anybody can do it?
If I am writing you a check, it should not be dependent on how many employees I have, whether or not you pick up the phone. I mean, that's just how I see it. And I've worked for large and smaller companies.
I love that as a sentiment, and I think the lower companies might get the short end of the stick on sometimes. But I agree, Trent. Absolutely, they should be getting the same service. No.
Matt, while we're on the topic of implementation, do you mind sharing some best practices here? One sort of gotcha, I think, that companies don't think about when selecting vendors is there are fine print in some of these contracts where you only get a certain amount of implementation hours or customer support hours, or it's like, yeah, we got, phone support. We pick up the phone in 60 seconds, but you only get 3 hours of that, in your contract. I don't know if there's anything there that's worth mentioning, but also let's just talk about, like, how do you be successful when you implement?
Yeah. I have not run into those hours. Maybe I just fix things on my own too quickly. But oh man, if there's any of those gotchas, definitely read the contracts. That's a big yikes. So I think it goes back to our earlier conversation to start with the values. Like what are we trying to solve? What are we, and then growing from there. I think pain points and stuff. The biggest thing for implementation that I've seen, and so my background right now, I'm doing large scale tech implementation for manufacturers. So I take legacy products like Excel files or handwritten notes and create digitized skills matrix to help with employee scheduling. And that process, it's really about culture in a lot of these manufacturing plants. So we have a system that has been working for 20 years and maybe is outdated. And now an HR person is coming in to say, hey, or an ops person is like, we need to update. But getting the right players on board, getting the culture, getting the buy-in before you do the implementation is huge. Because you can have a ops manager who's fully on board, but if their lineman isn't on board to actually do the process, it's going to fail. So you bring people in, you start to the conversation early and often, and really explain those pain points that you're solving for. It helps you down the lines when you hit those.
Have you seen anything specific? Like, is this like one-on-one conversations? Is it presentations? Is it like, how do you get this internal stakeholder alignment?
The way I do it is doing presentations at the beginning and then doing consistent trainings throughout. And Trent, I try to do what you mentioned of if there's a new feature, bringing those people back into the conversation. So not just keeping it at that high level, mentioning it to the supervisors who are on the floor. How do we interact with them? How do we get the people who are using it every day to get the new features and to stay interactive? So we actually have a long implementation process. It's a couple months, and we start out meeting weekly to do a big launch, and then we go through the process of how do we sustain this? How do we prove that we're adding value? And then we do quarterly business reviews with the higher level. So saying, this is what you brought us in for, this is what we're doing, this is how we've accomplished our goals, and this is what we need to work on. And we're as honest as we possibly can be because you need that honesty. You say like, hey, is this working for you? And you need to hear that feedback and shift gears if it's not. It's one of the things I like working for this Willia company. So they really care about that implementation process. So yeah.
I think for me, I'm a big believer in economic incentives. And I think that more likely than not, the person who onboards you is getting paid their bonus or not, whether you're successful and whether you stay on as a customer. And so they probably know the product hopefully pretty well, and they have a really good game plan. And I think when I talk to folks on that side of the table, the number one complaint is the HR teams aren't listening to me and they're delaying things and they're not following the playbook. And I think my advice would be, obviously, you want to use your own filter, right? And think for yourself, but that person probably knows exactly what you should be doing when it comes to setting up these systems and making them work. Trent, I don't know if you have anything to add on this topic.
No, I was taking notes in my head while both of you were talking. Okay. The only thing I would add, you just sparked something. I also love whenever my implementation specialists, even if most of the time they ask, but even if they don't, I'll go, what are other companies doing? Because I don't want you to just replicate my way if my way is insane. That's one of the benefits of working with a vendor that's got multiple clients across multiple industries. You can kind of pull some of the best practices. I think that's a missed opportunity that a lot of people make whenever they're implementing something.
Totally agree. I think the other thing that people discount is that there are lots of third-party consultants out there who are not that expensive, who have done whatever you're trying to do and can make your life a lot easier. And you don't have to pay somebody, even $10,000 to do some of these implementations, whether it's migrating ATSs or a new platform that integrates with an existing stack. You can look on LinkedIn, look on places like Upwork. You can find really high quality people that can help in that regard and save you a lot of time and money. By the way, Matt, before I forget, I wanted to ask you to drop that AI tool that you were using earlier. I think you called it Connect something into the chat, just because I personally would be interested in checking it out. I'm sure other folks would as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put it in right now. CustomGPT.ai is
cool. Got it. Love OpenAI. Hopefully they don't take over the world too much, but in the short term, they can help us all with our jobs if we're open-minded and willing to just open it and play with it, which I encourage everybody on the phone to do. We've got one last topic, and then we're going to do Q&A. We already have a number of questions that folks submitted during the RCP phase of this. If you've got other questions, please drop them in the chat. We would love to answer them. The last topic that I want to cover is just measuring the ROI and sort of maximizing the value from the HR technology stack. I think, again, it's funny. I saw a post on LinkedIn today about how so many HR professionals are moving to fractional because they get in fights with their CEOs, and the CEO doesn't believe in them, and they're like, you know what, I'm done. And then when I talk to CEOs, they're like, my HR person doesn't know what they're doing. And so I think like the way to potentially bridge the gap on some of these conversations is just dollars and cents. The C-level is under so much pressure from the board to like get the revenue up, get the EBITDA up, whatever the case may be. How do we think about the ROI and the value from these technologies? Matt, I don't know if you have any thoughts to kick us off here.
It's a great big question. I think you need to meet the CEO where they're coming from, the same way you would meet any problem, and be able to talk their language. So be able to talk the EBITDA language is huge. And starting from that point, then you can tie it to, all right, here are the business needs.
And what is the EBITDA language? Do you mind expounding upon that?
You're just talking about dollars and cents. You're like, how do we get revenue to the place we want? How do we get the profit to the place we want? And in order to do that, you'd understand, all right, here are the 4 business goals that the KPIs, whatever they came up with. This is how my HR strategy aligns with those goals. And then I'll dig even deeper and say, hey, these are my key performance indicators, my KPIs for getting us to those, and really talk to them and say, like, I'm on the same team as you. I want to get us to this goal of revenue as well. To do that, we need the right players on the team. To get the right players, this is how we're going to find them. So it's really starting where they're at and breaking it down from there, and then you can go really granular. Trent, what do you think? You got some more?
No, I love that. So I'm going to divert for just a second. If there are certain friends of mine that if they ask for directions, I don't tell them go 4 blocks, turn left, do this. It is go to the Burger King, make a left on the second tree on your right. Like they understand directions differently. And I think that if more HR people went into it from a business acumen, like Matt was saying, you're going to get so much more done because you're speaking their language. I think we've gotten better as an industry in this regard, but there for a while it was like HREs. Let's come in and do some TD Jake stuff. No, we got a business to run. So for me, I always approach it from that financial aspect. And there's it's called root cause analysis. You ask the 5 whys, which is kind of getting down to what is actually causing the problem. Taking what Matt was talking about of what do you want to accomplish, I like to do the 5 hows. And that 5 hows, usually I'm lining them up with, okay, is this the manager? Is this actually the employee? Is this something that someone on my team needs to be able to walk alongside them? And that how automatically comes up with the who. And then you've got your strategic plan that aligns itself with the business. So you need to know the revenue per hire. You need to know the revenue lost for terminations. Those are all hard costs that, if you're not if you're not creating and showcasing the value that you bring as an HR consultant, then you really can't blame the CEO, in my opinion. So when people ask me what I do, I tell them that I am responsible for the largest revenue producing asset and the largest expense in the organization. And
That's a great way to think about it.
I approach every decision in HR from that lens.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think when you look at your technology stack, there's no doubt that these systems play a very large role in the effectiveness of the people machine that allows all the other machines to run. So, yeah, amazing. Well, I think at this point, we'll kind of get into the questions that folks asked when they signed up. And again, any other questions, feel free to drop them in here. The first question is, Matt, I think you're probably the best person to answer this. How do you move from a legacy software? You talked about Excel spreadsheets, maybe some SQL databases, to a cloud-based HR tech. I want to move to like a real system that was built in the last 10 years.
Yeah. And again, you can't.
So shady. The last 10 years, I love that.
You just can't do it alone. I think you need the business case. You need to get the right players in the room, and you need to get the buy-in in order to push it across the line. One scenario that I had was we went from a 30-person company to over 150 very quickly, and we were doing performance reviews on Excel. It was I gave the managers a couple questions, and then they would type it out, and that's how they did it for the first year or so. We were looking at engagement software, so we looked at the 15 fives. We culture enhance the lattices, that world. And I put together exactly what you had, Phil. I had that spreadsheet. I had the pros and the cons, and I came with a solution to my CEO, and he thought about it for a while, and I had a very clear winner. And basically what happened was my winner wasn't chosen, but he had an advisor come to him right before and say, oh, actually he chose out of the top three. He chose one. My top was the next one. The advisor came to him and said, like, hey, have you checked out the one that I had been talking about? And within a day, we had that implemented. It was one of those moments of, it didn't matter how much I argued kind of on a spreadsheet on what features are, what it was. We needed that external validation from the investor to say, this is a good product. And then once the CEO felt comfortable with that product, it was off to the races, and we had full buy-in from the whole team. And I think it was just interesting dynamics of how to think about it. And like, you might not have full control. You can present the best thing possible, but you still need some external pressures. And in the future, maybe I need to think about, like, all right, who is influencing the CEO? How do I get them on board to really make this a solid decision? So a little bit of a tangent there, but that's definitely a piece of it, of getting that buy-in. And once you have the buy-in, you're off to the races. Yeah.
It makes it very real, because you put yourself in the position of that CEO. It's like, we don't need to change this tomorrow. I don't want to spend the money, I don't want to pick the wrong solution because it's going to be a disaster. I've got a million other things. This is not my number one priority by any stretch of the imagination. And maybe in this situation, it's not like the board member or advisor was an investor. Maybe it's like, I'm under a lot of pressure to make sure I do a good job by these investors who are breathing down my neck. And that's maybe my number one criteria, is just don't screw it up in their head. And so I'm going to use whatever they think, regardless of if it's the right product or not. And so it's a reminder to me of, get in the head of the person that you're trying to convince and understand what do they care about, because there's just a million things going on. It's not all about, the research is really important, and explaining it and like doing a good job. But at the end of the day, you just got to understand, like, what does this actually person care about? Trent, I don't know if you've had any experience going from super legacy to, trying to modernize, and any tips there.
I had the inverse happen to me. I led a project for an international bank, working with 10 different countries, trying to identify a new global applicant tracking system. And in the US, we were one of the only ones that was on a true ATS. Everybody else was on something that was kind of rickety, I guess is the only unprofessional word that you can say at best. So, we went through this laborious process, decided on who we were going to recommend that we go with. So I flew to Spain with these findings, presentations showing SWOT analysis, all the fun little stuff that I knew bankers liked. Got into the boardroom, and whenever it came time for me to present, they said, "Oh, hey, we're just going to go with the ATS that is attached to our LMS." So we went from iCIMS to Cornerstone.
Yeah.
So when we started that process, my hairline was like right here. Yeah. So Matt hit on it. The decision maker was not the CEO. The decision maker was the head of engineering, who said, "I don't want to do another vendor implementation or whatever. We already have everything set up with the LMS. Let's just turn on the ATS." And it produced a ton of work here in the US because, as everybody knows, we have a lot of regulations whenever it comes to hiring versus some of our partners globally.
And I think this makes me think about the point I was trying to make earlier, which is like around all these HR tech vendors. I think the strategy is we're doing global payroll. Let's do HRIS. Let's do ATS. Let's do, PEO, blah, blah, blah. And I think as HR professionals, you got to think hard about what is the right decision for your organization. Just because you use, I don't know, Rippling for IT management or something, maybe you should use it as an ATS. Maybe you shouldn't. And this decision is going to become more and more common. Deal actually today, like an hour ago, just announced that they bought an IT management company. So this stuff's just going to happen again and again and again. Matt, were you going to say something?
Nope. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. The next question is, what are ATS/HRIS tools for startups and mid-size companies? There are literally I don't know, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 these tools out there. We talked about a couple of them here. Basically, why our business exists is because there is a lot of nuance around. You have contractors, you get people outside the US, you want ATS, you want HRIS, payroll, etc., all this stuff. But I think a couple, and so, use the link that I dropped in the chat, and we'll send a follow-up email with some resources to answer this question. But I think super small companies, you're looking at your Gustos. As you kind of get bigger, you're looking at your, Bamboo, Rippling, maybe ADP. Get a little bigger, you're looking at your Paylocities. Deals, I guess, in the mix now. Lattice has a new HRIS. I'm not sure how that's going or not. That's probably for a bit up market. Bob is a great HRIS. Pinpoint's a great ATS. Greenhouse, Lever. I could probably list like another 400 like good vendors, and it's just sort of like good for who. And some of them there's all trade-offs, right? It's costs, it's implementation, it's ease of use, etc. But definitely take advantage of our HR tech advisors and book a call, and we'll try to point you in the right direction. But hopefully also some of those names are helpful in the meantime.
One piece that I always think about is benefits as well, and which ones offer. Is it a PEO? Is it just an HRIS system? Does it leverage some giant network that can get you some huge discounts on benefits? Workers' comp is another big issue, especially I'm in the manufacturing world. So how do you protect yourself in that, and how do you save the company money? So there's so many pieces to this, and it's really what problem are you trying to solve, and what features do you absolutely need, and then go from there for me.
It's a good point, and the benefits part can dwarf the HR tech spend. So it can be a huge lever to save money overall, and something to brag about internally and throw it in your CFO's face and use it to get leverage for whatever you want to do next. Next question, how do you make employees comply and use HR tech? They might be reluctant to use it in the beginning. Totally true. Matt gave some tips and tricks here around communications and whatnot. Trent, do you want to weigh in anything that you found to be effective?
We used to do, and it sounds hokey, but like scavenger hunts, for prizes, for gift cards, for whatever. We had one large department that broke into teams that were aligned to Game of Thrones, so the different houses. And it was kind of like finding Easter eggs in this new little system that we were using several years ago. And when the idea was presented, I'm like, nobody's going to do that. It almost created HR issues because people were getting so competitive trying to find the stuff. But I mean, they got into the system and they liked it. The benefit of that is they had a lot of feedback about, hey, it'd be great if you could also do this, or is there a feature that does that? And we were able to give that to the vendor that we were working with at the time. I mean, this was, I don't know, 7 years ago, somewhere around there. So any way that you can gamify it is great. The other is whenever I'm doing any kind of implementation, even if I don't need them, I want some of my biggest naysayers, managers on there with me. I want them helping me to implement it, because if I can get them on board and selling the rest of the organization is going to be incredibly easy. And they're also really good about pointing out things, again, that are very particular to the end user, because I think sometimes HR people buy systems that make our life easier at the expense of the employee experience. I want to make sure that I'm constantly focused on that client centric, and my client is the employee. So I want some of them on there to help me implement and help give me some ideas about how can we increase the adoption rate of the employees to this new technology.
I think that's great. I've found sort of cross-functional brainstorming sessions, people to be in your corner. People cross-functionally care about culture, recruiting, because they care about the company and they care about their own KPIs, and having them on your team when you're evangelizing a new solution, when you're explaining, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's why it's important, beneficial to you, etc. It's nice to have that come from the head of sales in addition to the people team.
Absolutely.
The next question we got is very specific, and I don't 100% understand it. I think it relates to how do you leverage AI to filter for education and applicant tracking system. I think maybe a good question here, and Trent, this is probably one for you. It seems like you're doing it. You're doing it with ChatGPT, now you're doing it with Recruit CRM, your new ATS. How are you using AI to filter candidates? And you mentioned you're worried about the bias of ChatGPT. How do you think about that and sort of false positives or false negatives, and making sure that you have an equitable hiring process and also get to the right people?
Right. So the first thing for a lot of HR professionals, they want AI, they love AI, they implement AI, and then they never check it. And then they're surprised whenever an audit says, hey, you've got bias in your system. And I know I'm walking a knife's edge because Lattice got in some trouble or got some blowback, but I do manage the AI process like I would manage people on my team. I inspect what I expect. So I run a search and then I run it a different way on my own outside of AI and see if I get the same results. And if not, then I want to understand why. Who has the bias? Is it me or is it AI? So the matching criteria I think is good because it's multidimensional. I'm not just saying who is as qualified as Matt. Well, if Matt graduated from Yale, decided to go to Harvard, he's done all this other kind of stuff, then the AI is going to be looking at that and going, okay, let me go find all the people that have got very similar backgrounds. Well, that could exclude someone economically who could not afford to go to Yale, but is just as smart as someone who graduated from Yale. So looking at that skill set, I value that more than I do education. I've seen a lot of really smart people that graduated from a community college and had people from Yale and Harvard and Princeton working for them. So I don't put a lot of emphasis on that as much as I do on the skills and the experience. So I leverage the AI matching to be able to do that, just to make sure that I'm looking at all kinds of candidates. And then also to do the inverse. That's something that someone taught me not too long ago. They said, if you're looking for A, then ask AI to look for C and see if it pulls in something. If they're polar opposites, then you know that you're okay. But if there's a little bit where you can't tell the difference between A and C, then you have a problem with your AI. So I haven't run into that big of an issue yet. I have seen a couple of things that maybe raise an eyebrow, but I think that many of the AI first companies are hyper aware of any potential bias.
I saw this thing on Twitter the other day, somewhat related, that the #1 college that Fortune 500 CEOs went to is no college. So 24, yeah, 24 of the Fortune 500 CEOs didn't go to a college. I think number 2 is Harvard. So pretty interesting. And yeah, to your point, especially, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years into your career, it doesn't matter. No offense, Matt. I know you went to Cornell. But
I promise you, I didn't profile you, Matt. I was just throwing out something. You were the only other one in there.
You elitist.
Yeah, but there's also too, Phil, there are a lot of new apprenticeships, tradesmen and women programs, boot camps that offer people an opportunity not to have to go to college, but to actually get. I mean, there's a software boot camp in the South that is basically built to have graduates out of their 18-month boot camp be able to go and actually work for the companies that are sponsoring the program. So I would much rather work with a boot camp than get some college person who has not worked a day in their life and think that everything that they learn is actually how you do it in the real world. And I don't care what you majored in. All of us found out after college that's not how the real world works. What we learned in class.
Very true. Last question, because we're sort of at time here. What's the #1 criteria that y'all have for selecting the right vendor?
Matt, I'll let you go first.
Number one, do they solve my problem? It's really, did I come with a clear problem? Does this solve it? And do I trust them? And those are kind of the two main points.
So mine is going to sound like a plug, but it is not. Mine is whenever I see research from like Phil's group, or am able to see that people like that with that caliber are recommending the product, immediately, like a lot of my walls come down. It's why a lot of times if people start asking me a lot of questions, I send them over to Phil's group and say, they are the pros, go deal with them. Whoever they say, I am probably going to be 100% behind them. So again, not a plug. That's my honest answer.
That's great. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for amazing conversation. Thanks for everybody who joined us. Here's what's going to kind of happen after that. We're going to send an email with the recording of this, as well as resources that were mentioned. If you want to connect with one of our experts at SSR, it's totally free. You can tell them, hey, we're this type of company. This is our pain point. Who should we be looking at? We've also got pricing data so that we can let you kind of negotiate, get the right price. And if you want to book something, you can use this link or book the link in the chat. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Thanks for everybody on the phone. Hopefully we shared some good nuggets in here. I know I definitely learned some stuff, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Alrighty. I don't know how to end this, but I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys later.
Oh.
I don't know how to end this.
All right.
Yeah. See ya.
All right. Take care.